Minimalists.
One of the issues that I've seen come up about minimalism is that many people see it as elitism. So I read a comment on a blog the other day that said, quote, "I think that one reason I've never embraced minimalism is that there seems to be an inherent disconnect with true suffering that makes it difficult to have a healthy relationship with those that don't have the same privileges as me." And I've also heard that it is another form of conspicuous consumption, a way of saying to the world, look at me, look at all of the things I have refused to buy. And I don't necessarily agree with those viewpoints, but I was just wondering, interested in what you would have to say on those things, and if you think minimalism is a type of elitist.
Barley, I guess it depends on what you mean by minimalism. Mm-hmm. If you just mean like if you mean asceticism that is sort of a material asceticism, that doesn't seem particularly elite to me. But if it's someone selling minimalism, like you go to the Gap and they're selling shirts that say minimalism on it, then yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's not what I think of when I think of minimalism. Let's just take the word minimalism out of this, because seems to be confusing you right now. And I totally get it, because there's baggage with any of these terms we use. So let's pick a different ism. Let's just call it intentionalism, right? Whatever you want to call it, if you're living intentionally, what does that mean? I'm using whatever resources I have in a deliberate way. Yeah. Now, when Ryan and I grew up really poor, food stamps, government assistance, we certainly could have benefited from being more intentional with the few resources we had. Yeah. And throughout our 20s, as we climbed the corporate ladder and we accumulated a ton of debt and got all the trinkets of success, we also would have benefited from minimalism then, being more intentional with our resources, because we made really good money, but we spent even better money. And so we had huge amounts of debt. We weren't being intentional either time, when we were broke and poor and impoverished, and when we were supposedly successful, or at least ostensibly successful, right? And so if we're talking about the intentional use of whatever is in front of you, your time, your money, your energy, your attention, well, then who wouldn't benefit from that? And so maybe minimalism isn't for everyone, but it's for anyone who is questioning the status quo, or at least being intentional is for anyone who is questioning the status quo. I'm as a bit of an outsider from minimalism, Kate, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this? When you hear someone talking about minimalism or simple living, I can see how it would conjure some images of this.
I think the only thing that to me would signal like not giving up the premise, right? If the premise of any of it is control, then you could do that with fewer belongings or with more belongings. Yeah. I remember finding out that the average reader of Real Simple magazine had like just a wild family household income. It was something like $180,000 or something per household, and I was like, "Oh, that's very simple. That's extremely simple living, real simple." But I think the aesthetic that what I was reading in some things was just that beautiful Spartan quality was just another way of saying, look at all the time I have to curate everything in such a way that it makes my life feel like it's full of beautiful choices. And that can be quite elitist and I think if the illusion is that we can determine every aspect of our lives with our magical choices, then yes, I believe that is utterly bullshit. Yeah. Yeah. But I think if we recognize that some of the things that are going to determine our lives are the things we don't get to choose. Yeah. And then we just try to live with truth and beauty and intentionality with the rest, then I say, make me a minimalist. Yeah.
So tell me what is your definition of an elitist, either of you? What is an elitist? So, someone who's rich and what? What makes a rich person an elitist?
I don't know what makes a rich person an elitist. I can tell you what elite means to me. Yeah. Elite means performing above and beyond something. Now, we use elitist pejoratively. Yeah. And so I don't really know exactly what it means. And so I'm not defending any point. I don't know. I think that word is thrown out there in a way to almost shut down conversations, right? Yeah. There are a lot of words like that. They're shaming words in a way where we throw out these words not to have a discussion around a thing, but to almost shut down a discussion around a thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that Barley is doing that here, but whoever was commenting on whatever post she was reading on the internet, it's almost as a way to be completely dismissive.
Well, because you can take anything and make it into the pageant of that thing. I'm just thinking of the, when the Pope, who has, and some of the most religious money in the universe, will wear like slippers, right, as a gesture of humility, and like that. There's that in the midst of that any theology, ideology, set of choices can always be like a quarter turn away from the parody of it, in which we can perform all of our values without necessarily having to like live with the contradiction of them. So I hear it when we have to strip down. Yes, you're imagining choice. You're imagining the illusion that life is something to be controlled, and that's only something, is what I heard in that question, that people with lots of choices can do. Yeah. But also, none of us get out of the problem of having to make these really, like, there's a lovely and boring word for it. It's prudential wisdom. Prudence is this wonderful word that just means the wisdom to see those fine distinctions and know. I think that's what you guys are talking about.
Yeah. So an elitist, I guess, could be a minimalist. But
sure.
But I don't know if it's the other way around. Because like I look at, well, you're a Jesus-y person. I would call Jesus a minimalist. Was he an elitist?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by elitist in that sense.
Right, and that's why I asked the question, is because like, what does it mean by elite? To me, it's when someone says minimalism is for elitists only or whatever, I mean, they're just shutting down the conversation. They're looking at it and saying, I couldn't live that way because of my own desires and my own actions. And so I'm going to put a label on it that is going to give me permission to avoid this, minimalism. I love what you talked about, take minimalism out of it. I mean, look at intentionalism or deliberatism or curationism or whatever it is.
Right.
I mean, when you look at it that way, it's hard to sit here and say like, well, minimalism is only good for rich people. I mean, I've seen countless articles where it's like, minimalism doesn't work for the poor. It's like, why would you exclude someone like that?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's fascinating to me because I'd have to pretend that we don't get all these letters and emails and phone calls from people from everywhere from Kenya to Kalamazoo who are talking about wherever they are on the socioeconomic spectrum. What they've realized is we've been acculturated to have certain desires that aren't our desires. It's called mimetic desire, right? And so there's all of these sort of cultural desires that are propagated by our religion, by culture, by society, by our peer groups, by our coworkers, by wherever we are in our city and our careers. And these things are quite often making us miserable. She mentioned suffering. And everyone is suffering. The people I see suffering the most, and it's not that one is better than the other. Quite often, the people I see suffering the most are the ones who I would look at and say, you have no reason to be miserable.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make the suffering any less real.
There's kind of a nice little, because like the problem of desire, I know it's like every philosophical school has this problem of like the problem of desire, and like, is it okay that we want things, and do we increase our own suffering by wanting too much or chasing creating malformed desires and then drowning in them, and we see that all the time with lovely people who just keep trying and trying and trying and buying, and they just never get there. And wherever there is, it's not a place they live. And there's a lovely little, I just remember having this problem after coming out of the hospital when I was trying to figure out okay, well, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I know I have to figure out some kind of way of doing this. And obviously my way of doing this before was my super hustle train, and I was great at it. And now that can't be the driver. And I found...
Why can't it be the driver?
Because I could just, I mean, I would just I would let that feeling of productivity consume everything else.
I think that's a big driver. The desire to be productive, that's also a mimetic desire, right? Other people, we see them hands moving and GTD, whatever it is, you know, getting things done and hustle, right?
I made that whole system one time. It had lots of folders.
Yes.
Like every day was a folder. And
Right.
if your partner talks to you, like you have to put it on a note and then put that note in the day folder. I was like, I don't feel like we have that kind of relationship.
It's, you know, the spreadsheets of goals, all of these things.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing inherently wrong with them. What I see is we're creating a culture that is obsessed with doing things that make us miserable. And that's why I asked, well, why is that not sustainable for you? Because the question you asked, like, okay, I got out of the hospital, and I said, okay, now what?
Now what?
Yeah, now what?
Now what? I was really good at
can't
this
we
other
all ask
version.
that?
Yeah,
right?
I really hope. I mean, my drama tends to give me more like you know, I just get like stark choices sometimes, but I really do think we all get we all get the problem of now what? Like we've got numbered days, hours, resources, people to love. Everything about us narrows to a dot on the horizon. And because of that, like what now? And I had really let like that kind of like being in fifth gear feeling it helped me get out of a lot of difficult circumstances. I was like, well, I was one of the only women who could get like a job in my field. I mean, I was able to be hyper productive at a time in which no human person should be able to, and all of that gave me a certain amount of sense of purpose and joy. And then all the rest of it made me feel exhausted and scared.
Yeah.
And like it was never going to be enough. And I didn't even know how to just get off get out of the paradigm.